Mark, please join me on the stage over here. And we'll talk about building a creative challenger brand. All right. So, Dooley, is that a challenger brand in your opinion?
It is on the path to getting there. We are still in the early stages, but that is the philosophy behind what we are doing.
So, what is a challenger brand anyway, in your definition?
We will jump right into that in the session, and I have
Okay.
some
Well,
quotes and opinions on what that looks like.
wonderful. Let's make sure that your slides will work. So why don't you get them on, and in case they don't work, I'll entertain the people and tell some jokes if needed.
All right, well, let's give this a go.
Give it a go. Yes, technical stuff and events, they go hand in hand. Oh well,
Is that working okay?
it is working. They just enlarge uh, the deck, and then you're good to go. All right,
All right.
stage is yours. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Well, I know that we're running a little bit behind, so we'll jump right in today. What is going on, everyone? I am Mark, and I am the VP of Marketing over at Dooley. We are a sales tech platform, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how to build a creative challenger brand, using that as the foundation to build a media arm, and how you can turn that media arm into a moat as a competitive advantage. So usually when I do these events, I always like to start with, why should you listen to me? So I joined Julie as employee 7 and the only marketer, and we took things from seed all the way through hyper growth with over $100 million raised through Series B. And today, in the next 20 minutes, we're going to go deep on some of the tactics and strategies that we used to build that brand at Dooley and drive some of the growth that we've seen today. So again, what are we going to focus on? Really, there's going to be 3 core things and some examples. Number one of the reasons why you're probably here at Winter is, how can you deeply understand your audience? That is probably the most critical piece to diving deep and figuring out how to build a successful brand, and also how to build a synergistic engine where brand and demand gen fuel each other in a positive way. The second thing is how to prioritize your winning creative ideas. So typically, especially if you're in a startup stage, it is opportunity cost everywhere. It's not that you don't have enough to do, it's that you have too much to do, and you need to really focus on signal rather than noise and double down where you actually will succeed. The third thing, and probably the most important, is how to think about distribution engines and more around your campaign and program strategy, and then really bring this back all together to some examples and going through explicitly how we use kind of 1 through 3 over at Dooley, what these looked like, and we'll chat through some Q&A with Pep after. So this is the quote, Pep, that I was mentioning, and one of the big believers in building a challenger brand is because sales tech is so saturated. So this is from Udi Ledergor. He's the chief marketing officer at Gong. For those of you that don't know, Gong is a 7X unicorn. They're one of the largest players in the B2B sales tech space. Originally in the call recording market, what's now known more affectionately as revenue intelligence. And at the time when they were first starting, there were dozens of players who were selling very similar products with very similar messaging, right? Very much a red ocean space. And what Gong attempted to do was say, hey, we are going to make an active choice to be different and not better. And again, Udi goes on to say here, you'll see on the screen, I won't read it, playing it safe is the riskiest thing you can do, especially if you're in a saturated market. So when you looked at the companies that were in that space, what I call the sea of SaaS, blues, grays, you could take any hero at any homepage and swap it over to another, and you probably couldn't tell if you changed the logo what company it was. So what Gong did is they said, hey, we are going to build something that feels authentic, that is by sales and for sales. We're going to go purple, gradients, a dog mascot, bubbles. We're going to write in short text-based messaging how we talk, and we're going to challenge this notion that enterprise and B2B has to be boring. And they really set the foundation, I think, are one of the leaders in the space who have adopted this philosophy, where a challenger brand takes a strong stance and isn't afraid to take risks to differentiate itself. So more on that later, but really at the end of the day, the one thing, if you took away only one thing from today, is as you build your brand strategy and focus on creative, do so to be different and not better, because when you are better, you get compared on the same axis as all of your competitors and you're in feature comparisons. When you are different, you get to control the narrative and really focus on what makes you unique and have a different conversation with your customers. So Really pillar number one, and we'll talk about some of the frameworks and tactics we use specifically at Dooley, how we started to deeply understand our audience to start building our strategy. And shout out to Joanna Weeb over at Copy Hackers. This is one of my favorite models. I don't know if we're going to share the deck, so I can post these links later, but in the show notes of all the slides, I have links to these free resources that you can access. But this is a very simple but powerful model that we use. One of the first things that I use at Dewey within day 2, and it's very straightforward. What you do is you either listen to customer call recordings on demos or your product overviews, or talk to them live. And then you set columns to chronologically track, like in time order, what they said and then the next thing they said. And you capture what are called documentary moments. So relevant sound bites, things that they say. And usually within the first 5 to 6 calls, you start to see patterns. And in this case, make sure you flag each of the personas you're talking to. We've highlighted some of those as an example here in gray. This is one of the most powerful ways to understand themes and key things that are keeping your customers up at night or what's top of mind for them. And really, like, this is the foundation that I always like to use at the basis of understanding my audience to begin with, because it also gives you a great bank of customer quotes that you can apply copywriting frameworks to, which tend to drive the best performing headlines, call to actions, and so forth. So once you have a good sense of who your customers are, kind of what matters to them, start mapping those themes. The next thing that we did, and I'm a huge fan of this model over at Strategizer, it's called the value proposition canvas and the value model. Essentially, it lets you look at not only your customers' functional jobs to be done, but also their social and emotional pains. And that's probably the most important area that I always counsel marketers to lean into. When you're trying to build a challenger brand or creative ideas, where you will win and really reach people is on the social and emotional level. So again, the resources are in the notes. I'm happy to share that out later, but this was the first thing we did after the Copy Hackers framework over at Dooley. We built out some persona maps. We mapped our features and benefits to values. We built a positioning framework, and we really focused on like the key themes we saw emerging and overlapping for the social and emotional pains of our customers. And takes me to number 3. Huge fan of this framework from Drift. It's what we've always used over at Dooley. It's called the Integrated Marketing Campaign Framework. And the high level essentially here is a campaign idea is going to be the largest strategic overlay. And then those themes that you're going to start to see that matter by persona happen at the program level. But 2 things that I would advise here, and we'll talk about some fun campaigns we did, like one with the chain smokers a few months back over at Dooley. But Brian Balfour, one of the first growth marketers over at HubSpot, he's built a lot of great resources talking about channel model fit. So I've included those in the notes. But one thing I see a lot of marketers do that doesn't set them up for success is they create strategies and campaigns not designed for the channel that they're targeting. Typically speaking, you're going to see about 70% of your acquisition come from one channel. It's called the power law of demand, especially in the early startup days. And it's very, very important that you focus on a high-level campaign strategy, turning that into personas and themes, and then making sure that those offers are designed very, very specifically with the channels in mind that you're targeting. So you make sure that you are showing up in a way that your audience are expecting. And I'll give you an example of how that worked for us and how we saw some others not using that effectively where it wasn't successful. So again, prioritization is probably the next most important thing you can do, because there's never a lack of ideas. It's how do we execute the winning ones that are actually going to drive impact. So here is the framework that we use at Dooley. Again, it is very simple, but very powerful. It's a spin off the ICE framework from the product world, if you're familiar with it. So impact, is this a 100x initiative or a 2x initiative? How many people can we reach? What pipeline can we generate? Whatever the goal of the campaign is. We score these on 0 to 5. So we would put a Google Sheet. We have ideas in Slack, just random campaign ideas, theme ideas, things like that. We would all put them in a G sheet, and we would start to score them from 0 to 5 across these 5 axes. Confidence, again, fairly straightforward. How confident are you that this will be successful? My best recommendation here is to look at other platforms if you don't have past success that you can benchmark from. A recent example, more on like a tactical level, was the red flags trend that you've probably seen on LinkedIn. That happened on Twitter about 6 months ago. So there are some platforms that are a little bit ahead of the curve. And if you can look at where someone or some trend is successful elsewhere, it gives you a good benchmark that you probably can lean into that direction depending on where you're investing. Effort, especially at the early stage, really focus on the lean initiatives that don't take a ton of budget, creative, or time. Again, a lot of what we did at Dooley, I was one person with literally no budget, no design support, and needed to create things from zero myself. The last two are new, and they're different. So novelty is really looking at saturation in the market. So you've probably seen a number of companies do like these poll type comparison contests. I've seen companies try to replicate this on the success of others, and we've seen significant diminishing returns with future ones because the market has seen it, been there, done that already. So try to focus on the novel ideas. And then virality. This is different than will it go viral? It's, is there a viral engine to it? And I'll talk about this from the perspective of the hot sauce sales show, Flyer Talks, we built at Dooley, more in the examples section soon. So once you have a good sense of that, distribution is, again, how you're going to reach your audience at scale creatively. And if you've heard the adage, always be closing, as a marketer, always begin with distribution. And there's two layers of distribution. One is, these were some of the buckets that we were looking at Dooley in terms of the types of plays we wanted to make. So we first said, okay, what is the platform play or sort of the area that we're going to focus? And we looked at a few different axes to evaluate these, similar to how we evaluate creative campaigns. How many people could we reach? How engaged were they? How much was it going to cost? How long would it take? And how many people are doing that? So once you've done that, in our case, we isolated social as kind of the tier one. And then we started looking at within social, where do we want to focus? Again, at Dooley, because we have a freemium product designed for account executives and salespeople, they were mostly spending their time on LinkedIn. So our natural evaluation was, let's start with LinkedIn. And again, coming back to Brian's quote here, really, you're going to have to experiment quickly and get to MVPs first. Take a lot of at-bats. It's going to take you a lot of at-bats to figure out once you've struck gold. But once you've seen success, really focus and double down, because that's where you're going to start to build momentum, and it's going to be like the game of Risk. So you would never take your troops from North America and jump all the way over the other side of the world, because you're going to dilute your base. Find those 1% steps that you can make once you've solidified a growing foundation. All right, so now is the fun time. I'm going to talk really through 1 through 3 and some of the examples of why we did this at Dooley, how we did it, and what the strategy was behind it. So if you come back to understanding the audience, the persona mapping, one of the key things that we saw for both individual contributors in sales and sales leadership was that sales was a stressful job. It did not matter if you were a VP of sales or an SDR that was new, sales was stressful, and people needed a way to decompress and release that stress. And one thing that I noticed very early on joining Dooley was that there was a massive ecosystem in what's called this sales humor space that very few, if any, B2B brands were tapping into to create content. And at this point, I just started going outbound to the folks that ran these channels. And I said, hey, I've created some content. I put together this pilot. Would you begin sharing this? I think your audience would get a laugh and it would drive engagement. And then if it's successful, let's build a partnership model or some way that we can continue this going forward. And within the very first pilot that we did, we were able to reach hundreds of thousands of people, drive a significant volume of web traffic. A big part of our strategy that we were able to drive about a 3,000% increase from our starting point in traffic all the way to where we are today, about 20,000 globally on Alexa, was from our sales humor strategy in this media arm that we built. And again, you can see from the axis, low fidelity creative, right? I didn't need designers to build this. It was leaning into the social and emotional pains of sellers. And when it comes to channel model fit in channels, maybe 1 or 2 brands over the past 2 years had started to create content, but they weren't approaching their audience and the channel the way that they wanted to be met. So I'll give you an example. When we started partnering and building what we call our meme acquisition engine, we always knew that we would create content that was funny and humorous. If you take a distribution engine like a sales humor or a daily sales, and you post an event or something that is not aligned to what the channel is doing, you're going to see virtually zero engagement. And that's what a lot of brands do. They wanted to talk about themselves. They didn't get creative to link their social and emotional pains to their value prop. And that's the most important thing you need to do, is to make sure that your channel strategy and how you show up is going to meet people's needs and what they expect, because that's how you win the hearts and minds of people. And again, you'll see this was back when Dewey was about 1,000 followers. You know, we've grown to about over 17,000. A lot of that picking up momentum recently from our media arm. Had no sales team, no design team, and you can see this was just me and, you know, creating memes, and we were doing account-based marketing, and we create funny GIFs that link back to our product. We would send people in the comments. So whatever you do, it doesn't have to be high fidelity. You don't need producers, videographers, design budgets. Like, this was a $0 initiative that we started with just creativity in Canva. And likely there are distribution engines you can lean into in your space, as long as you're creative enough and think about how you're approaching that channel. So this led to one of the second kind of fun initiatives that we did at Dewey, a hot sauce live sales show we called Fire Talks. And again, within the same theme of, this was at the beginning of the pandemic. There was a lot of Zoom fatigue with everyone pivoting to a virtual event strategy. And we said, how can we lean into this sales humor ecosystem to give people stress relief and provide them great sales content, and use this and package it in a way that we can build a media arm. And at the time, you know, Chris, our CEO at Dewey, was a huge fan of some of the B2C companies who were doing this and always wanted to do a hot sauce sales show. So it was a natural fit, and we built this out with a pilot with $10 a hot sauce that we shipped on Amazon, went outbound to some sales leaders. We had Dale Dupree, James Buckley, and a number of folks come on and talk sales with us while having hot wings. And very quickly, it became a smash success. And one of the reasons that we're able to do that comes back to virality. So you'll notice that quote that I had from Udi, the CMO at Gong earlier. The way that we approached virality with the show was, as we had people on, we said, hey, we've put you through what we called the hot seat. We're going to let you nominate up to 3 people you want to put through yourself, you know, your executive network. And very quickly, we went from a few people to moving up to some of the most senior leaders in the go-to-market space, to where we did what's called a gauntlet with the folks at Gong. We had a handful of the team on, we did a full company-wide session, and at that point, the team nominated Udi, their CMO and their CEO, and we built out a C-suite episode where we then went from you know, early stages of not being known to well over 1 million impressions and hundreds of people posting about Dewey in this show within the span of about 3 to 4 months. So we now have a part of our lifestyle business at Dewey where we have sales themed hot sauces as part of our merch store, and how we built the brand and really starting to engage customers. So again, these are literally now tied into the DNA of our business, all from a fun creative concept that we built you know, earlier in the pandemic, and it's really led to how we've started to build the brand and get creative in the market. So that takes me to a really another fun one that we had, which was when we raised our Series A with a lot of the, you know, hype and the brand that we had built. We brought on the chain smokers in our cap table, and we said, hey, we don't really see any like B2B brands doing like lifestyle partnerships or something fun. So we did a custom Dewey chain smokers hot sauce. We did some custom merch, bomber jackets, swag, and we did this really fun campaign with them, again, thinking about the themes that salespeople cared about and trying to focus on a very unique experience. We called it Concerts Are for Closers. And again, you can see some of the stuff we did. We did custom videos with them. We recorded a music video. When we did our hot sauce sales show, we even recorded a Fire Talks anthem that we played for them on Zoom, and had some great, you know, clips and recordings of them like commenting and laughing on the video. But you'll see this was us at an event with, we had a, you know, live person doing music. We had a live hot sauce tasting here with the head of growth at Calendly and the head of marketing over at Loom, Rebecca Klein and Garrett Scott. And this became part of how we tied trust and content authority with fun and creativity from the brand perspective. And it became a unique way where people started to see Dewey and say, hey, what is that? Like, I want to learn more. So the last one that I'll talk about, and you've probably seen a lot of B2B brands do this poorly, are awards. So Trust Radius, G2, Forrester, you know, there's a number of awards that B2B brands tend to win. And the way that they usually promote them is, hey, we won this award. Here's an image of the award. Great, thanks. And the one thing we always wanted to do at Dewey was, what is a fun, creative way we can stand out and get people to pay attention in a unique way? So here are the 2 most recent campaigns that we did that were fun. We did a play on GQ magazine as it sounds like G2, and we did these GQ magazine covers. We had about 90 people at G2, including like even their CEO and their C-suite, say this is the most creative campaign they've ever seen. And we drove a ton of engagement, opportunities, and pipeline because people were talking about Dewey in a unique way. Most recently, we did a play on Star Wars, which was R2-G2. And we had all of these things of like Dewey conquering the galaxy because we were the #1 trending sales software across every single category that we were in. A big part because we had built this really strong brand engine where people loved what we were doing and wanted to be part of what was going on. So I know we're running a little behind, so I'll wrap at the 19-minute mark here, and Pep, we can jump into some Q&A.
Awesome, man. Yeah, big fan of all this stuff. Chaitanya. My name is hard to say, but but Chaitanya is saying being different versus being better, and thus the better need to be sacrificed at the, if you want to be different. So how do you think about those things?
Don't compromise on quality if that's something that's really core to your brand. I think a lot of marketers conflate you can't be different and be better. The example of better versus different is, in the early days at Dewey, when a lot of people were trying to understand how we intersected with the sales tech ecosystem, they would compare us incorrectly and say, oh, you're like a gong, but we weren't, right? So what we did is rather than focus on, hey, we're better than A, B, and C, we said, oh, actually, we complement those things. We sit here in this different space. It's not a category you've heard of. It's not something you've heard of. It's actually this new thing that we're building. And we tried to reinforce our visuals, the way we talked about it, and our branding and our messaging, all to help us change that narrative to where you're not like, oh, you're like a gong. It's like, no, we complement gong. Most of our customers, including us, use gong, right? When you have your best performing playbook at gong, how do you make sure that that's leveled up across all your reps? Oh, well, we use Dewey to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think that the problem is that in SaaS, in tech, it is just nearly impossible to be objectively better.
Yes.
Like, think about email marketing tools. Like, which one of them is actually like better than others? Like, nobody. CRM, same stuff, right?
Yep.
I mean, you can zoom in for a very specific ICP who has unique, use cases or whatever. But so it's just not possible to win on better.
Yes.
Everybody has every feature.
Yes. It changes the narrative, right? You're not talking about, oh, they have this feature and you have this feature. It's like, no, actually, we are something entirely different. And you change the way you're looking at it. If you're looking for a resource, folks in the chat would highly recommend checking out Andy Raskin and the work he's done with Zuora on narrative design, strategic narrative. You can look it up. There's a Medium deck. Read that article. It's probably one of the best resources on being different and changing the narrative.
Yeah. Travis is asking, what's your relationship with Sales Humor, the LinkedIn page with 500,000 followers?
Yeah, so we're partners with a number of the Sales Humor engines. Again, when we first started, it was literally just me cold outbound emailing the folks there. We started kind of at a free pilot stage and are now, more long-term partners. And a big part of the content that we create is based on tapping into the distribution engines. And I mean, one thing that I think a lot of marketers fail to think about and execs fail to think about is they get you thinking about leads and not long-term brand investments. If you want to win the hearts and the minds of your category, you need to show up at 9 p.m. in their Instagram feed, not selling them a product demo, but just being there and relating to them. And I mean, we have literally had one call closes that have come from Instagram memes or LinkedIn where they bought on the first call. And you can link that back, but you want to focus on how do we relate to the audience in a way that the same vein that HubSpot bought The Hustle, one of the biggest newsletters. Why do they do that? So they are showing up every day in the inbox of people in B2B tech and have an association with that brand.
Absolutely. I think like building mental availability has to be like the #1 goal for marketing. I mean, it's the old reach and repetition, right?
Yes.
Like everywhere to see, and as long as that content is also hinting towards what is this company and when do you use it, right?
Yes.
So Jovita here has a question of like, well, aren't you, gambling away your seriousness? Like, are people taking you as seriously if you're just cracking jokes? And is that a problem?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting thing, and I mean, I think Gong is a great example. So Gong, when they were competing with a number of players in the early days, said we were going to have a bulldog as a mascot. We are going to have bubbles and gradient backgrounds and fun, flamboyant characters, and we're going to post memes on our social, and we're going to write in all caps, and we're going to build personal brands and be authentic. And when you look at the difference of the market cap of players in that space, and Gong sitting at 7x unicorn valuation geared for IPO, Gong took that exact same playbook and are seen as one of the most enterprise-ready companies. And obviously, they've evolved. But one of the things is you need to understand your audience, right? At Dually, we are selling to salespeople. We have a freemium product for account executives, sales managers. Yes, we are trying to relate to people and get them into the product. In that case, even like a VPs of sales, we have great feedback from like senior directors about this content because it relates to them. So if you're in a Fortune 500, very small space selling to chief human resource officers, there are still people, but make sure that you build your brand strategy with your audience in mind, because there always will be that balance.
Yep. Fahad is asking, how do you decide which campaign idea will resonate with the audience? Like, do you have a way to predict how it will go? And also, what happens if it doesn't go well?
Yeah, so first thing that we do is we look for signal on different channels. Twitter tends to be like 5 to 6 months ahead of LinkedIn. If we're seeing someone doing something amazing on TikTok, on Twitter, on Instagram, and we're focusing on LinkedIn, we'll say, hey, there was success there. Let's do a pilot on Twitter to see how that tracks. That way we can test it with a different audience, a different company, a sister arm. We use that same framework that I talked about, and then we have some level of predictability. So like if you were to go into LinkedIn, if you're running a company page and you go to your competitor section and you add Dually and you look at the engagement and the growth that we're driving, a big part of that is we've built a strong playbook around our media arm, how we create content, and have created a solid, repeatable motion to do that, which is one of the reasons why we outpace Series E companies, even though we're still a Series B startup.
Yeah. Also, I think like the cost of failing on social media is like, well, nobody saw it, so
Zero.
you move
Yeah.
on, right?
Yeah. If literally no one saw it, like it's not like your board and your investors are gonna be like,
Totally.
oh, we took that risk.
There's no downside in posting, boring content. I mean, people will move on. So yeah, take risks. All right.
Yes.
All right, we're out of time. Wow, thank you so much, Mark. You're a wealth of knowledge. Cool to hear. Everybody follow Dually on LinkedIn. See what they're up to. All right, I'll see you later, man.
Thanks. I'll drop my LinkedIn in chat. Send me a connect. Great to chat with you, Pep, and enjoy the rest of the show, everyone.